Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School.
Oh, this week we're starting a new festival, Complicated Failures, and we're going to begin with Steven Spielberg's Artificial Intelligence. Let's get into it.
I want to be a real boy. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see /here, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people find good media.
That's right.
Yeah, and we are constantly building the channel, doing different kinds of festivals. This is a new one. This is one that I came up with, this idea of the complicated failures, because
love it.
All four of these movies are made by they're made by directors who should know better. I guess that's one way to say it. I mean, there's varying degrees of what we're going to see here.
Yeah, for sure. And technically it's 5 movies if we're counting our punishment review as well. Do you want to go through the movies that we're doing?
Let's do it. Let's do it. So
on top of this,
obviously we're starting with Spielberg's AI. After that, we'll be doing the Coen brothers' Lady Killers, which I know that you actually like quite a bit, right?
Well, I don't know about quite a bit. I just don't think I hate it as much as everyone else.
You're like, whoa, we're getting ready to review it. I'm not saying I love it. And then after that, we're going to be doing Cloud Atlas, which I think has... Oh, I can't wait to talk about it. And then finally, next to finally, we'll be doing The Lovely Bones, Peter Jackson. I'm riding the high of Lord of the Rings. I can do no wrong. And then finally, as a punishment review, we'll be doing Robert Zemeckis' Welcome to Marwen.
Excellent.
That one's going to be holy shit. So
all of these conversations.
It's very it is complicated though. Like to think about tonality and like intent and the things you were hoping that happened. And
this happens, I think, in careers. You know, we're not talking down on these guys. Obviously, they can't all be winners, as Bad Sin always says, right?
That's right.
And you know, when you have filmographies like a lot of these directors do, you know, the vision, and once you're there on set and it's shooting, and once it's in an editing room, maybe it's not quite what you hoped it would be, or maybe it's exactly what you hoped it to be. I think. Through a lot of these, we will be questioning their decision making.
Yes.
This one in particular, I remember seeing in the theater in 2001, and remember thinking it was like 20 minutes too long. And I'm sure we'll get to the ending for sure.
It's 2,000 years too long, Pulcher.
That's true. That's a very good point. This movie takes place in the not so distant future. In 2142. And then, of course, 4142. I don't know if you noticed the use of the same numbers there, but I don't know if that's some creative thing. But the fascinating part about this movie is that this is a Stanley Kubrick idea. This is something that he had been working on for decades. Before he died, and he kind of gifted it to Spielberg before he died, saying, "Hey, this is way more in your wheelhouse. This I think would work a lot," but he gave him a bunch of concept art, the original script, all this stuff.
Two So Brian Aldiss wrote the short story.
That's right. Super Toys Last All Summer, right?
And then he had two more Super Toys stories after that. Super Toys in the Winter, and I can't remember the third one. But this is kind of an amalgam of a lot of those ideas. Kubrick
Did you realize, if you're talking about trilogies here, I got to throw this little nugget I found out in here. Apparently, this is the first part to Spielberg's unofficial Running Man trilogy, continuing with Minority Report being the second, and then Catch Me If You Can being the third. So... I would have never put those three together as like, that's his trilogy.
ever for any reason. It's weirder than the Apocalypse trilogy that John Carpenter did. Like, at least that one, you're like, it's tenuous, but I get how
it's a stretch.
Mouth of the Madness and Prince of Darkness fit together.
Unofficial, of course, but you know.
Where does Catch Me If You Can fit? Anyway, okay, whatever. So
he's running away.
Yeah. Someone's running. A child is running away. So in the Super Toys story, that is, yeah, you're absolutely right. That was the inception that Kubrick grabbed a hold of. And one of the reasons why he could never find his in on the story is because, you know, in the Super Toys story, the character of David, the child, it's very much like a Black Mirror episode where we know we're in the future, we know that people can't have kids, and there's this mother, Monica, and her son, David. You're like, oh, Monica and David have a weird relationship for a mother and son. And the twist at the end is Dad comes home and it says, guess what, honey? The government said we can have our own kid. And that's when they get rid of David. And you're like, oh, my God, David was an android. That was the thing that Kubrick fell in love with, right?
Yeah.
Was that short story. But
that's a little more interesting.
It is. But the reason why he was like, I don't know how we'll ever do this, is Kubrick believed there would never be a child actor who could accurately portray an android. So he wanted to do it CGI, which is
and
why
he was right.
Yeah,
he was right.
He was totally right. Which is
sorry,
why.
Sorry, Haley.
Sorry, Haley. You can still see dead people, but you can't play a robot. But I think that the important thing here is to note that that's why he got Spielberg involved. Is at the time, Spielberg is on the cutting edge of so much CGI stuff.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
He's like, oh, could we make a CGI kid? But you're talking about like, whatever.
At least that story has like a aha moment or a reveal where you're like, oh, the whole time he was a robot, or
yes,
the whole time Bruce Willis was dead, or whatever.
There's none of that here.
So they pitched this movie as Blade Runner meets Field of Dreams.
Are you for real?
Yep, that's what I found out in my research. Is that's how they got it funded.
Oh, God!
And there's a lot. Oh. There was a lot of back and forth because Spielberg had been panned for this movie a lot, and especially for the ending, which apparently has been confirmed by the guy who kind of ghost wrote for Kubrick, that actually all of the stuff that is kind of the sweeter side, like the teddy bear and the ending and everything, is all Kubrick, and Spielberg injected kind of the flesh fare and some of the darker stuff, which is kind of the opposite of what you would originally think.
Well, because the thing I would say this. It makes sense why Kubrick never made it then. Because you also know, and I don't know if you've ever heard about this, and this was a story from John Ronson, the author, does a whole short story about going to Kubrick's manor and going through some of his files for, like, one of them was like a Napoleon movie that he was going to make, that he collected hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of artifacts and stuff.
You've told me about this before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then never made the movie. So you're like, this is just one more where he got obsessed, did a bunch of stuff, and was like, and then there'll be aliens. And then eventually was like, that sucks. And was finally like, hey, Steve, are you doing anything next year? I'm going to die, so I won't leave you any guilt, but, you can make this movie.
I will say that I would actually really like to see Kubrick's version of this, because I imagine it being very different. And I would be very interested to see his execution from a direction standpoint. Just thinking of, obviously, 2001 is hard not to think of because it is future and sci-fi a little bit, but just like his deft hand. And not to say that Spielberg doesn't have the deft hand, but I just don't think this was the movie that was right for him to do. Even so, that was a bad instinct, in my opinion, from Kubrick to just assume Spielberg could handle this.
Well, let's dig in. Let's dig in. So the question that John Hurt's character at the beginning, William Hurt's character at the beginning,
Dr. Hobby.
Oh, brother, Professor Hobby, fuck. Right there, like a little on the nose. Okay, what Professor Hobby is stumped by at the beginning when one of his students posits it to him. Because first he's like, what if a robot could love? And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
And
really?
everyone's
okay.
like,
yeah.
Sexy love. Like, it's not sexy love. It's
right. Like love. But then one of his students or somebody in the room says, can a human actually love a robot, even if the robot loves the human?
Yeah.
Right? That's the question that he can't answer.
Totally. What's the responsibility of humans have to respond to them, right? Like with love. Is it up to the human to decide that? Like, and I have to say, like, some of the questions in the places they go in this first part are really good. They're really interesting. There's concepts here that are interesting. We open with the ice caps in the ocean, overflowing, and ice caps have melted, and coastal cities have been drowned out, and all this stuff. And
sure, but
there's elements of the bigger picture stuff that they're talking about that I'm like, okay, that's a cool idea. I see why that would be interesting, but then it just the delivery is like.
But even when the lights come up and we see the waves, I want to start off with Brian Cox's Robert McGee adaptation going,
God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you. It's flaccid, sloppy writing.
You're Spielberg. You couldn't have shown, not told? Like, why is there a voiceover telling us that the ice caps melted? You could have shown us that. You know how to do that. Which just to me, right out of the gates went, oh, that's a bad omen. But anyway, okay, back to this idea. Back to the professor hobby.
Yes.
So, can a human actually love a robot, even if the robot loves a human? One, it never gets answered. In this 2,000-year-long movie, it never gets answered. And I'm not even sure if Spielberg knows what that answer is or has an opinion on it. The short story doesn't think that it can end well. The short story is super cynical. And the original guy who wanted to make it, Kubrick, definitely didn't think so. Even if he wrote all this, the reason why he didn't make it is because look at 2001. Hal is a psychotic beast that kills people. So he doesn't think that that's true either. But honestly, I felt like Spielberg didn't even know that question needed to be answered. Like, he never even entertains it throughout the movie. And let's be fair, it's not that interesting of a question to begin with. Can a human love a robot? Who gives a shit? I don't know. Like, who cares? I mean, lonely and desperate enough people do shit like that all the time today. It doesn't need to be 2142. There's weirdo losers out there who marry their fucking waifu pillows, right? Like there's people out there that are desperate enough to do that shit right now. So it's not really that interesting to even ask the question.
I totally agree in the way, and obviously we'll get to it, but the way they draw it out at the end, I'm just like, why the fuck do I care?
Oh my God,
why do
dude.
I care? And we'll get into this. Let's jump into some of the story and how it's kind of revealed. Obviously there's this younger couple who, two actors I've never really seen before. I think the guy is Jason Robards' son.
Yeah, I wondered that. I saw the last name.
Like I've never really seen either of them. So like to me, it would maybe make more sense to have like a, I don't know, just like I'm thinking like a Gwyneth Paltrow or somebody as the mom, or I don't know, just somebody.
Kate Blanchett, somebody you know.
Just somebody that's maybe a little recognizable. But they, this first act is all with his family. They drive to this Cybertronics freezer place where he works apparently. And we find out they have a son who died. They also have a future car.
They totally do. It's like a three-wheel future car
that they're driving here. And I do have to say the future here is pretty cool. He does a pretty good job with the future. There's elements that are kind of like, but there's also cool parts too. So I don't want to totally throw this movie under the bus from a filmic perspective. I feel
no. I agree with you. When was Minority Report?
After this, I would say maybe 2004.
So
5,
the taste
maybe?
of that is here, and he does a good job with that. Yeah, I agree.
No, I agree, and it looks good. His framing and some of these things, Halo Joel Osment or David has kind of these weird halos and framing throughout the movie and everything.
Yeah.
Like he's a robot angel, I guess. I'm not exactly sure.
He's Christ. Adam, he's Christ.
I mean, obviously, there's definitely some of that going on here.
Yeah.
But he's seemingly normal, and we have Osment in his like cute stage, and he's a prototype, but like not sure what what's going on here. Like, he played it so hard that I was like, acting? Like, that's what it felt like when you're watching his performance. So Kubrick's instincts were correct.
Yeah.
Because they'll know, like, he doesn't blink, and there's these weird moments, and it's almost, there's like almost horror movie moments in this movie.
Yeah.
Where, like, when he starts, ha 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 ha, and starts laughing at the dinner table and stuff like that, I'm just like, wait, what am I supposed to feel about this kid? Like, I don't get it.
And for the early parts of the movie, that super weird, uncomfortable laughter at the dinner table was the most interesting part to me. The whole, like, hide and seek part, blah, whatever, don't care. When she gives him the secret words and then he's like, what did those words mean, Mommy? And becomes her son, don't really care. But the uncomfortable, uncanny valley laughter moment, I really liked that. I was like, oh, there's something interesting here. And but Spielberg, and I don't want this to sound, Spielberg is not creepy or cynical enough.
Yes.
To go to those places. Again, you know, there's been an
he could touch on them for a minute.
He could touch on them.
Like, yeah.
But if you go back to, like, there is an age-old debate, and we've talked about it on this show before, who directed Poltergeist, right? Like, was it Tobe Hooper? Was it Steven Spielberg? I think it was both. And when it is, like, moments, it's Spielberg. And when it's, like, the guy ripping his face off, I mean, actually, it's Spielberg's hands that are ripping the face off. But I guarantee you that scene was compiled and edited and put together by Tobe Hooper. Like, one has a cutthroat sensibility, and the other person just, like, loves movie magic, and that's fine. But it's like, we're supposed to be looking at, he is already too sweet of a character. In the short story, in the second short story, by Brian Aldiss.
Yes.
In the second Super Toys story, David gets into an argument with his mom about whether or not he's real. And Teddy's there. He's in the short story. And he dissects Teddy and kills him accidentally because he's convinced that he's real. Right? So even in that version, it's cynical as hell. But Spielberg isn't willing to go there. He wants an innocent. He wants fucking Pinocchio. Yep.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. That, like, this is Pinocchio, right? Like, we're talking about Pinocchio because he'd be a real boy. So Monica and Henry have a son that's died, right? And that's the whole reason they're interested in this. He's
in a coma. He hasn't died. He's in a coma, and they don't think he'll ever get out.
They make it seem like he's dead, right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean they're like, he's...
They're trying to replace their son, right?
Yeah, he's never getting out of his coma.
For sure.
Sure.
Well, yeah. So let me ask you, if this is a replacement for their son, and he's a robot, what happens in 5-10 years? He's not aging. He's a fucking robot. He's not going to become a teenager, right?
No.
So they're just going to have this little kid run around their house for the rest of their life.
Yeah, they'll be 80.
It doesn't make sense.
They'll be 80, and Haley Joel Osment will be running up being like, Mommy, let's play hide and go seek. And she's like,
Mommy.
I can't walk anymore. I know. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. That's the problem, is that there's so much of this that, like, on the surface are fun or at least tantalizing ideas that go nowhere. I felt like...
I gotta say, this is all... There's a lot of unsettling things in this movie.
Sure.
None of this is good for the mother's mental health.
Like, no, not at all. Exactly.
This is not good. This is bad.
Well, and the Henry, the husband, is the one who introduces David, and then he's the one that's like, ugh, and doesn't like him.
He's never bought in. He never seems to be bought
like, dude, you started this.
Yeah, and he hands her the paper and is like, hey, just make sure you're sure before you sign. And she's like, I'm not sure. And just signs away.
And signs it anyway.
And I'm like, oh, cool, this is going to end well. But, like, Monica and Henry, it's just not healthy. Like, he's a toy. She sees it as a gift. At least, well, not at first. At first, she gets pissed.
Yeah.
She's like, you're trying to replace our son, whatever. And then she kind of is like, well, he is very real, and starts kind of becoming used to it, and then signs a paper, starts giving him his commands, putting his hand on the back of the neck, and that's when he can start loving, right?
He imprints like a baby duck would. Yeah. Well, and then of course, as we all know that it was going to happen, the real son wakes up from his crazy death coma and is kind of a dick. And I have to say, like,
I mean, there's immediate sibling rivalry, right? Like right away, and he's, he sees him as a toy as well. They have Teddy, of course, who they open up, and she gives him that Teddy who's also unsettling.
Totally unsettling. Okay, but here's the thing.
Yes.
Why? Well, okay, that's my second question. I'll ask it in a second. The first one is, why, if you were going to build a mecha that was a child, why would you make it with the intelligence and capability of magical thinking that a 9-year-old has? Isn't that incredibly dangerous? Like, even if they don't have super strength, okay? Like, let's even say, okay, they don't have super strength and lasers that come out of their eyes or whatever. Like, he's easily manipulated by the real son into cutting his mother's hair. Like, he can be manipulated because he like, if you had a fucking robot that believed that Santa was real, how much damage could that thing do? It's terrifying, actually, right? Like, why wouldn't you embed it with logic that's beyond what a 9 or 10-year-old would believe?
Excellent point. Excellent point. Yeah.
That's super dangerous to do. Like, and here's the problem. We stick with a mecha for the rest of this movie that thinks that a blue fairy could turn him into a real boy because he read Pinocchio.
Yep.
Professor Hobby, you fucking idiot. Dude, you should have put in some kind of failsafe that was like, the earth is round, the moon can't chase you. Like, regular things that you should know about logic and life, because you put a robot that is basically immortal, right? You put an immortal being and made it think that, like, I need to find a blue fairy because fairies are real. This thing is more powerful than any human being. It lives for thousands of years. When we're finally contacted by alien life, it's the only fucking ambassador for planet Earth, and it believes in fairies. Sorry.
Hey, that was a great rant. That was a really good rant.
It's so stupid.
It's a very logical rant. I'll give you that. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I think you just did. Like, why program it to be stupid?
Why program it to be stupid? It's immortal. It's immortal. It will live forever. Like, it should at least know that gravity exists, or I don't know. Fairies don't exist.
The Santa comment is perfect, though. I think that's spot on. Why create a robot that believes in Santa? That's so perfect. But we have Martin, who's their real son, and then they just kind of keep David around, and Martin's a total bully. Yeah, and can't defend himself. He's a weakling, but just picks on this kid. Yeah. And all of his friends, are poking at him. And they have this incident at the pool, and also the spinach incident where he's like, blah, blah, blah,
dude, his face starts melting. That's amazing. Yeah. That moment I was like, that's pretty cool.
It doesn't hurt, mommy, when he's getting fixed. But they ultimately decide to give him away, and it's kind of this like whole. I do have to say, when that pool incident happens, there is a great POV shot of where David just stays down in the water, and we just see them saving his life.
And they leave, yeah.
We can kind of vaguely hear what's happening, but like he's just sunken at the bottom and doesn't know what's happening. And I thought that was actually a really cool shot of kind of the perspective, his POV.
Yeah, it was great. I totally agree.
And then you know, it's just a kind of wild scene. He gets abandoned, and you know, pretty tragically, but you know.
Yeah, he gets sent. He gets it's like a cat you don't want. It gets sent to a farm. He just gets left in the woods. And that's the first time.
It's worse than that, because he's like, no, mommy is just trying to save her, and he just wants her love and her appreciation. Yeah. Which, after hour 75 of this movie, you're just like, I don't care anymore. Yeah. This bitch gave you away. What are you so wrapped up in?
Okay. And you just so you put your finger on one of the main like real problems or flaws in this movie is that, and I'm sorry, he was a little boy when this movie was made, but in this movie, Haley Joel Osment's full of shit. His character's totally full of shit. Like we know that the kid's full of shit. His mom doesn't want him. The blue fairy doesn't exist. The mom's sad, but she'll get over it. She's got her real son back who wasn't in a coma anymore.
She'll be fine.
This kid's a fucking robot. We know that he'll never be able to be a real boy. It's never going to happen. The fairy isn't real. The story isn't a fairy tale. And even when the fucking aliens show up at the end, we still know nothing is at stake.
They even say it to him. They say, you could live for one day with your mom, and that's all we can give you. But it's all an illusion.
And she's not even your mom. She's a hologram that we made because nothing's at stake, because Haley Joel Osment is full of shit in this movie, unfortunately. And Spielberg lassoed that star and put all his hopes and dreams on it, thinking, because he was charmed for some reason, but I wasn't. You weren't. Most people weren't. Most people went, what? Nothing's going to happen.
And maybe he feels like a duty to Kubrick, who he obviously looked up to and you know, had a relationship with, to kind of be his swan song, his last final moment. Which I would love to hear what Kubrick says about this movie.
I bet Kubrick would fucking hate this movie. I think Kubrick would be like, claptrap.
It's just a wild. It goes places where it just doesn't need to go. Right?
Not at all.
It goes places it doesn't need to go. And then we got to talk about this big Act 2 shift to Gigolo Joe. And my family's watching it. They're like, did you skip ahead or something? Like, what? Who is this guy? Like, it was just like, why are we in this room with this robot pimp? Yeah, why is he?
Why is he in this movie? Gigolo Joe, the male prostitute mecca on the run from the authorities after being framed for murder. What? That's a second movie. That's a different movie. Like, we accidentally went from the first drive-in to the second drive-in.
Hey, Joe, what do you know?
Oh, God. Yeah, he doesn't need to be in this movie. And the movie doesn't give a fuck about him either.
No,
it's like it uses him, and then when he leaves, we're like, oh, he's going to go get sent to the trash pit.
Well, and, like, the way they meet is like, you know, this Children of Men scene where they throw all the robots and parts into this cage, right? And then he looks like a real boy. No one's ever seen this before. And this is where Spielberg is really kind of masturbating here, right? Is the flesh fair and playing with the stuff, and Rogue City looks cool. And I guess he actually what did he create here? I forgot what it was called. But the movie also pioneered a virtual studio, a technique which allowed Spielberg to walk through the virtual version of the city of Rogue City with his camera to select shots, so he can kind of see it. And they ended up using it on Lord of the Rings and stuff. So like, he pioneered that, and I think really that was, maybe this was just kind of a test project to play with that kind of stuff, because obviously the Flesh Fair, and we have Brendan Gleeson in here and that kind of stuff.
Who's
and there's
driving around a fake moon.
Yeah, it's a moon, which it looks cool, but it's also like a jail.
It's so weird. It's so jumbled and ugly, and not in like a fun Terry Gilliam way. It's just like the neon bikers and this whole thing. And I have to say, and I hate to do this, and we do not need to delve into this, But at this point, mechas have been around for like 30 years, right?
Yep.
30, 40 years, something like that.
To the point where they're disregarded in society, right?
There's way too many perverts out there that there wouldn't already be child mechas. Sorry, I'm just saying it. To be like, a child? Like, no! It would be one of the first things that would show up on, like, the dark web. Like, it would, right? Like to be like, oh, he must be a real boy. I'm like, dude, you guys are trying to make this world realistic? That is not realistic to be like, no one's ever made a child mecha before. Like, I do not believe that at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree with you about Gigolo Joe and Jude Law's character here. And, I guess if you're going to make a gigolo, yeah, make it look like Jude Law. He's a beautiful man.
Yeah, although
I would sleep with
his
him.
hard hairline, his hard hairline is pretty. Yeah, I would sleep with it too.
They make him look plastic and stuff, but you're totally right. Why is he even in this movie? He's his friend, like for like 30 minutes of this movie before he asks, like, hey, so what are you doing? What are you looking for? It's like, a blue fairy.
Let's go find Robin Williams.
Dr. No. None of it makes sense. And that's his solution, is some video game to answer the questions. And it's just the investment of what we're supposed to feel emotionally never feels earned. Because
we know he's full of shit.
Yeah.
Nothing he's talking, none of the journey that he goes on.
I can't connect with you because you're a robot in the first place.
Yeah.
I know you can love, but not like a traditional person can.
Yeah.
Or you think you can.
You're never going to get your mom back. She's the one who abandoned you. Mm-hmm. There's never going to be... Okay, so finally, with the help of Gigolo Joe and his fucking teddy bear...
And his aquacopter as well.
And his aquacopter, Haley Joel Osment finds, Professor Hobby, which I like. I like the washed out New York with buildings falling over. And
awesome,
it looks awesome. Great. It's really interesting. But we don't explore it at all. Again, most of this movie,
the Statue of Liberty under, like, that's I love it.
It's awesome. But again, most of this movie, I feel like I'm at a really cool party, but stuck in the corner with some drunk guy trying to tell me about a fucking dream he had. So we're back with Professor Hobby, and we see all these different versions of David, all getting ready to be shipped out like fucking Chucky dolls, right? Mm-hmm. Even like a girl version of David.
Yeah,
it's
Darlene.
Super creepy. It also begs the question, why wouldn't you personalize them like Cabbage Patch Dolls or American Girls? Like, why do they all look... Like, why would you want a fake kid and literally your next-door neighbor also has Haley Joel Osment? It makes no sense.
Great point.
Why are they all white? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, really? There's never been a Latino family that lost a child? They all want Haley Joel Osment? Whatever. But anyway, David... has a real identity crisis, and this to me, Palcher, is the most interesting part of the movie.
It's what the movie should have been about.
David tries to commit suicide. That's the most human thing you could do. Way more human than loving somebody. You could program a robot to love somebody, but can you program a computer or a robot to self-destruct out of despair? Out of ennui? Like, no, that's the most individualistic thing you could do.
I agree. They do say at the beginning, or they at least question it, and I want to say that Dad says this at some point, that, like, if he can love, then that means he can hate too. And before he breaks down and kills himself, we do see him destroy...
He destroys a couple other Davids.
No, he destroys the other David in his house. And we find out, of course, Professor Hobby's real son. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Astro Boy. This is basically the movie Astro Boy.
I haven't.
But it's pretty much the exact same scenario, except Astro Boy, like, saves the world. And there's, like, some kind of meaning behind what he's doing.
Palcher, is Astro Boy 3.5 hours long?
No, it's not. Then you'll watch it, is what you're saying?
Yeah, sure, I'll watch it.
There's a lot more action, too.
Well, and I mean, but you're right, this idea of preservation of oneself is the most natural of tendencies. So for a machine to make the decision to self-destruct because he doesn't have a unique identity anymore, that to me, I'm like, you finally gave us like a nugget of gold this far into this, and then the payoff is zilch. He goes down in the water, and the little
he sees the blue fairy.
Picks him up. He sees the blue, and dude, if you could possibly do an object lesson of the feeling of watching this movie, it's that he's underwater. He sees a statue that to everyone else other than him doesn't mean anything, and then he's trapped for 2,000 years.
Yeah, the Ferris wheel falls on him, and then he basically falls asleep for 2,000 years staring at her.
God.
And then they eventually, the aliens eventually take over at this point, and let's get to this ending.
Fuck, man! At that point, I was like, it had spent
like
all of my patience.
But okay, he tries to kill himself, sees the blue fairy, boom. That's when credits should end. To me, if you're going to at least make this, but this movie, I thought it was going to end like 6 different times.
Yeah,
what is the point of keeping going the story about a robot that we don't really care about? Like, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me, and it's 15-20 minutes too long. They over-explain everything. Like, why are we like? You know, Teddy.
The aliens look like shit. The aliens look like shit too.
Teddy has a lock of hair from his mom, so now they have DNA to be able to recreate this. And okay, let's pause this ending for a second because we haven't talked about Teddy. Holy shit, Teddy is so weird and creepy. He talks like at the most random parts of the movie, and it's unsettling. It's very much like Hal.
Why does it have an adult man's voice? Why does a child's super toy have the voice of a guy who would call
maybe he's just
heavy
old.
breathe on a phone?
He's just old.
The voice aged? Wait, so that's your
no, his programming is like
so now he sounds like this.
I read that his animatronics in this movie were more complicated than the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. Apparently there was so much going on with his animatronics that it took like this whole team of people to run him.
And yet when you look at it, he just looks like a Teddy Ruxpin.
Exactly. It's a Teddy Ruxpin. Yeah, he walks around and talks, I guess, but like his only use really is to have the hair at the end, right? Ultimately, that's the only thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's kind of he's
like a buddy.
Yeah, he's a sounding board for David, I guess. Yep. But he also, here again, the same problem. I'm like, Professor Hobby, you're making these incredibly powerful devices. Like, a fucking Alexa knows important things about the world, and it's a pod in your house.
I totally thought about smart speakers with what they're, the way, like,
that's
just
what
with
I'm
the
saying.
technology.
Like how great it, okay. If Teddy Ruxpin or whatever this weird Teddy Ruxpin thing is, if it had the intelligence of Alexa, this movie would be 25 minutes long. Because totally. Every time that Haley Joel Osment was like, the moon is trying to chase us, Teddy, it would be like, no, it's not, you fucking moron. The moon is the moon. Like, it's in the sky. It's super far away.
So Teddy hands the aliens this lock of hair, and they say, give him what he wants. And then they say that David is the enduring memory of the human race because it's been 2,000 years. And I'm like, okay, one, he's not human. He may be a memory of what a human was.
Yeah.
But to the smallest, slightest degree, like, you're blowing this out of proportion. And ultimately what this comes down to, from a storytelling perspective, is they leave nothing to the imagination.
Yeah.
Part of going to the experience of watching a movie is to have your own thoughts and ideas of, oh, what really happened. If he killed himself at the end or jumped off and saw the lady at the bottom. I love that.
He goes down, he sees the blue fairy, the Ferris wheel falls on him and kills him, boom, credits.
Yeah.
It would be amazing.
But now they're over-explaining, they have this whole day together, he's making her coffee. I'm like, what are we doing here? I don't care about this kid.
I don't care about any of this. And
then they explain more with the voiceover at the end.
Yeah. You're basically watching the hallucination of a robot. for 20 minutes at the end of this movie, and you're like,
yep.
What? Why do I care about any of this, right?
But hey, no. He had a birthday. He finally got a birthday. It's his perfect day. He tucks her in, he falls asleep, and finally he dreams like a real boy.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make... Also, like, I mean, the idea that alien life finally comes down to figure out anything about planet Earth and meets David as, like, you are the final vessel that holds all knowledge about humankind inside of you. It would be like if aliens came down and like found a time capsule and opened it and there was a fucking Tamagotchi keychain inside of it. Like that's how much representation of humankind David represents, right? He was a pet. He was a keychain virtual pet that got thrown away. Like it's not.
I think you're incorrect.
Realistic.
He's the enduring memory of the human race.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I had that backwards. But like, there are so many more interesting aspects. I love the Flesh Fair stuff. I think that's super interesting. I would have loved to have known about the humans that are booing and wishing for not replicants, the mechas to be destroyed. Like what happened in the blue collar world when all of a sudden these mechas became the labor and union and destroyed cheap labor, right? Like, that's
we get the
interesting world. Like,
we get the dump trucks of all of the body parts and everything, and I guess a lot of I was reading that some of the actors are actually real amputees that were going and like putting themselves together and stuff. So there's elements of this movie that are cool or can be cool or have the potential to be cool, but I mean it's just there's no care factor, there's no buy-in, and they over-explain the ending to the degree where I'm just like, cool, you're like, why don't we just show the aliens in the break room after all this is over saying, no, can you believe that kid? Like what else are we gonna show to like
can you believe that kid? Hey, do you think that kid's done giving his mom coffee yet? Holy shit! Oh god, like, that's amazing.
Why don't we go even further and deeper into this so we can make it 20 minutes longer? Dude,
you can imagine
it's a mess of a movie.
You can imagine how I feel as somebody who, like, when we get to the dinosaurs in that Terrence Malick film, I'm like, no more navel gazing. Get back to Brad Pitt. This is bullshit.
That's all it is navel gazing. I completely
agree. It's all it is. Oh my god, wow. I love the aliens in the break room. Hey, can you believe that kid? Robot kid, who would have thought? We came all the way down here. We knew the ice caps melted. We knew all these humans were dead. Fucking robot kid, bottom of the ocean. What are the odds?
Yeah, look at that. He's a human race. What a mess of a movie, though. Really, really ridiculous. And
what a waste.
I remembered hating it when I saw it in the theaters, just like, even as a, 2001. So I'm, what am I, 20 years old, maybe 22 years old. Wait, I was born in 79. What's that? Yeah, 22. Yeah. So 22 years old and just not really understanding what they're doing, and of course, like, loving Kubrick and indie film and Spielberg, like, this is a wet dream, right?
Yeah, it's a dream come true. Sure, it is. Oh god, man,
wow.
It's just
what a one to start off with for the fest, though. I'm excited. It makes me excited for this festival.
Yeah, I mean, this thing's a Where's Waldo of good ideas. You're like, oh, there's one.
Yeah, it is.
And then you look for 20 minutes, and you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but the overall thing is just bad.
It just was either executed incorrectly or it was just a bad idea, and you should have just kept it on the cutting room floor. But
it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea.
Crazy. Well, thanks everyone for enduring us through this masterpiece.
Yes,
of film history.
Next week we're going to be getting into that one scene from Pan's Labyrinth, and then after that we will be getting into the Coen Brothers Lady Killers.
Yeah,
so please stay tuned. This is going to be a really fun fest,
and hopefully we're in person at that point too.
Yeah, the fingers crossed. So we'll see what the world looks like then. But
awesome.
For now, I'm Adam Sherlock.
I'm Adam Palcher. Like and subscribe. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.